The Two Caskets. Far, far away in the midst of a pine forest, there lived a woman who had both a daughter and a stepdaughter. Ever since her own daughter was born, the mother had given her all that she cried for, so that she grew up to be very cross and disagreeable, as she was ugly. Her stepsister, on the other hand, had spent her childhood in working hard to keep her house for her father, who soon died after this second marriage, and she was very much beloved by the neighbors for her goodness and industry, as she was for her beauty. As the years went on, the difference between the two girls grew more marked, and the old woman treated her stepdaughter worse than ever, and was always on the watch for some pretext for beating her, or depriving her of food. Anything, however foolish, was good enough for this, and one day, when she could think of nothing better, she set both the girls to spin while sitting on the low wall of a well. "And you had better mind what you do," she said, "for one of those threads breaks first shall be thrown to the bottom." But of course she took good care that her own daughter's flax was fine and strong, while the stepsister had only coarse stuff, which no one would have thought for using. As might be expected, in a very little while the poor girl's thread snapped, and the old woman, who had been watching from behind the door, seized her stepdaughter by her shoulders and threw her into the well. "That is the end of you," she said. But she was wrong, for it was only the beginning. Down, down, down went the girl. It seemed as if the well must reach into the very middle of the earth. But at last her feet touched the ground, and she found herself in a field more beautiful than any summer pastures of her native mountains. The trees waved in soft breezes, and flowers of the brightest colors danced in the grass, and though she was quite alone, the girl's heart danced too, for she felt happier than she had ever been since her father had died. So she walked through the meadow till she came to an old tumble-down fence, so old that it was a wonder it managed to stand up at all, and it looked as if it depended for support on the old man's beard that climbed all over it. The girl paused for a moment as she came up, and gazed about for a place she might safely cross. But before she could move, a voice cried from the fence, "Do not hurt me, little maiden, for I am old, and I have not much longer to live." And the maiden answered, "No, I will not hurt you. Fear nothing." And then seeing a spot where the clematis grew less thickly than in other places, she jumped lightly over. "May all go well with thee," said the fence, as the girl walked on. She soon left the meadow and turned into a path which ran between two flowery hedges. Right in front of her stood an oven, and though its open door she could see a pile of white loaves. "Eat as many loaves as you like, but do not harm me, little maiden," cried the oven. And the maiden told her nothing to fear, for she was never hurt anything, and she was grateful for the oven's kindness in giving her such a beautiful white loaf. When she had finished it, down to the last crumb, she shut the oven door and said good morning. "May all go well with thee," said the oven, and the little girl walked on. By and by she became thirsty, and seeing a cow with a milk pail hanging from her horn, turned towards her. "Milk me and drink as much as you like, little maiden," cried the cow, "but be sure you spill none on the ground, and do me harm, for I have never harmed anyone." "Nor I," answered the girl. "Fear nothing." So she sat down and milked till the pail was nearly full. Then she drank it all up, except a little drop at the bottom. "Now throw any that's left over my hooves, and hang the pail on my horn again," said the cow. And the girl did as she was bid, and kissed the cow on her forehead, and went on her way. Many hours now passed since the girl had fallen down the well, and the sun was setting. "Where shall I spend the night?" thought she, and suddenly she saw before her a gate, which she had not noticed before, and a very old woman leaning against it. "Good evening," said the girl politely. And the old woman answered, "Good evening, my child. Would that anyone was as polite as you. Are you in search of anything?" "I am in search of a place," replied the girl. And the woman smiled and said, "Then come a little while and comb my hair, and you shall tell me all the things you can do." "Willingly, mother," answered the girl. She began combing out the old woman's hair, which was long and white. Half an hour passed in this way, and then the old woman said, "As you do not think yourself too good to comb me, I will show you where you may take service. Be prudent and patient, and all will go well." So the girl thanked her, and set out for a farm a little distance, where she was engaged to milk cows and sift the corn. As soon as it was light the next morning, the girl got up and went into the cow-house. "I'm sure you must be very hungry," said she, patting each in turn. Then she fetched hay from the barn, and while they were eating it, she swept out the cow-house and strewn clean straw upon the floor. The cows were so pleased with the care she took of them that they stood quite still while she milked them, and did not play any tricks on her that they played on the other dairymaids who were rough and rude. And when she had done, and was going to get up from her stool, she found sitting round her a whole circle of cats, black and white, tabby and tortoiseshell, who all cried with one voice, "We're thirsty! Please give us some milk!" "My poor little pussies," she said, "of course you shall have some." And she went into the dairy, followed by all the cats, and gave each one a little red saucer. Before they drank, they all rubbed themselves against her knees and purred by way of thanks. The next thing the girl had to do was to go to the storehouse and to sift the corn through a sieve. While she was busy rubbing corn, she heard a whir of wings, and a flock of sparrows flew in the window. "We are hungry! Give us some corn! Give us some corn!" cried they, and the girl answered, "You poor little birds! Of course you shall have some!" and scattered a fine handful over the floor. When they had finished, they flew over her shoulders and flapped their wings by way of thanks. Time went by, and no cows in the whole countryside were so fat and well tended as hers, and no dairy milk had been so much milk to show, and the farmer's wife was so well satisfied that she gave her higher wages, and treated her like her own daughter. At length one day the girl was bidden by her mistress to come into the kitchen. When there, the old woman said to her, "I know you can tend cows and keep a dairy. Now let me see what you can do beside. Take the sieve to the well and fill it with water, and bring it home without spilling one drop on the way." The girl's heart sank at this order, for how was it possible for her to do her mistress's bidding? However, she was silent, and taking the sieve, went down to the well with it. Stopping over the side, she filled it to the brim, but as soon as she lifted the water, it all ran out the holes. Again and again she tried, but not one drop would remain in the sieve, and she was just turning away in despair when a flock of sparrows flew down from the sky. "Ashes! Ashes!" they all cried, and the girl looked at them and said, "Oh, I can't be any worse plight than I am in already, so I will take your advice." And she ran back to the kitchen and filled her sieve with ashes, and once more she dipped the sieve into the well, and behold, this time not a drop of water disappeared. "Here's the sieve, mistress," cried the girl, going to the room where the old woman was sitting. "You are cleverer than I expected," said she, "or else someone helped you who is skilled in magic." But the girl kept silent, and the old woman asked her no more questions. Many days passed during which the girl went about her work as usual, but at length one day the old woman called her and said, "I have something more for you to do. There are two yarns, one white and the other black. What you must do is wash them in the river until the black one becomes white and the white black." And the girl took them to the river and washed hard for several hours, but wash as she would, they would not change one bit. This is even worse than the sieve, she thought, and was about to give up in despair, when through the rush of the wings through the air, and every twig on the birch branches which grew by the bank, was perched a sparrow. Back, black to the east, white to the west, they sang, all at once. And the girl dried her tears and felt brave again. Picking up the black yarn, she stood facing the east and dipping it in the river, and in an instant it grew as white as snow. Then turning to the west, she held the white yarn in the water, and it became as black as a crow's wing. She looked back at the sparrows and smiled and nodded to them, and flapping their wings in reply, they swiftly flew away. At the sight of the yard, the old woman was struck dumb, and when at length she found her voice, she asked the girl what magician had helped her to do what no one had done before. But she got no answer, for the maiden was afraid of bringing trouble on her little friends. For many weeks the mistress shut herself up in the room, and the girl went about her work as usual. She hoped that this was an end to the difficult tasks which had been set to her, but in this she was mistaken. For one day the old woman appeared suddenly in the kitchen and said to her, "There is one more trial to which I must put you, and if you do not fail in that, you will be left in peace forevermore. Here are the yarns that you washed. Take them and weave them into a web that is smooth as a king's robe, and see that it is spun by the time the sun sets." This is the easiest thing I've been set to do, thought the girl, who was a good spinner. But when she began, she found that the skein tangled and broke at every moment. "Oh, I can never do it!" she cried at last, and leaned her head against the loom and wept. But at that instant the door opened, and there entered, one behind another, a procession of cats. "What is the matter, fair maiden?" asked they, and the girl answered, "My mistress has given me this yarn to weave into a piece of cloth, which must be finished by sunset, and I have not yet begun, for the yarn breaks whenever I touch it." "If that is all, dry your eyes," said the cats. "We will manage it for you." And they jumped on the loom, and wove so fast and so skillfully that in a very short time the cloth was ready, and was as fine as any king had ever worn. The girl was so delighted at the sight of it that they gave each cat a kiss on the forehead as they left the room behind, one after the other as they had come. "Who has taught you this wisdom?" asked the old woman, after she had passed her hand twice or thrice over the cloth, and could find no roughness anywhere. But the girl only smiled and did not answer. She had learned the value of silence. For a few weeks the woman sent her a maid, and told her that as her year of service was now up, she was free to return home, but that for her part the girl had served her so well that she hoped she might stay with her. But at these words the maid shook her head, and answered gently, "I have been happy here, madam, and I thank you for your goodness to me, but I have left behind a stepsister and stepmother, and I am fain to be with them once more." The old woman looked at her for a moment, and then she said, "Well, that must be as you like, but as you have worked faithfully for me, I will give you a reward. Now go into the loft above the storehouse, and there you will find many caskets. Choose one which pleases you, but be careful not to open it until you have set it in the place you wish it to remain." The girl left the room to go to the loft, and as soon as she got outside she found all the cats waiting for her, walking in procession as was their custom, and they followed her into the loft, which was filled with caskets, big and little, plain and splendid. She lifted one up and looked at it, and then put it down and examined yet a more beautiful one. Which should she choose, the yellow or the blue, the red or the green, the gold or the silver? She hesitated long, and went first to one and then to another, when she heard the cats' voices calling, "Take the black! Take the black!" The words made her look round. She had seen no glass casket, but as the cats continued their cry, she peered into several corners that had remained unnoticed, and at length she discovered a little black box, so small and so black that it might have easily been passed over. "This is a casket that pleases me best, mistress," said the girl, carrying it into the house. The old woman smiled and nodded, and bade her to go her way. So the girl set forth, after bidding farewell to the cows and the cats and the sparrows, who all wept as they said good-bye. She walked on till she reached the flowery meadow, and there, suddenly, something happened. She never knew what, but she was sitting on the wall of the well in her stepmother's yard, and then she got up and entered the house. The woman and her daughter stared as if they had been turned to stone, but at length the stepmother gasped, "So you are alive after all? Well, luck is ever against me. And where have you been this past year?" Then the girl told how she had taken service in the underworld, and beside her wages had brought home with her a little casket, which she would like to set up in her room. "Give me the money, and take your ugly little box out of the house," cried the woman, beside herself with rage, and the girl, quite frightened at the violence, hastened away with the precious box clasped to her bosom. The outhouse was in a very dirty state, as no one had been near it since the girl had fallen down the well, but she scrubbed and swept till everything was clean again, and then she placed the little casket on a small shelf in the corner. "Now I may open it," she said to herself, and unlocking it with a key she hung in the handle, and she raised the lid, but started back as she did, was almost blinded by the light that burst upon her. No one would have ever guessed that the little black box could have held such quantity of beautiful things. Rings, crowns, girdles, necklaces, all made of wonderful stones, and they shone with such brilliance that not only her stepmother and her daughter, but all the people round came running to see if the house was on fire. Of course, the woman felt quite ill with greed and envy, and she would have certainly taken all the jewels for herself, had she not feared the wrath of the neighbors, who loved her stepdaughter more than they hated her. But if she could not steal the casket and its contents for herself, at least she could get another like it, and perhaps a still richer one. So she bade her own daughter sit on the well, and threw her into the water, exactly as she had done the other girl, and exactly as before, the flowery meadow lay at the bottom. Every inch of the way she trod which her stepsister had trodden, she saw things that she had seen, and there the likeness ended. When the fence prayed for her to do no harm, she laughed rudely and tore up some stakes that she might get over more easily. When the oven offered her bread, she scattered the loaves on the ground and stamped on them. And after she had milked the cow and drunk as much as she wanted, she threw the rest on the grass and kicked the pail to bits, and never heard them say, as they looked after her, "You shall not have done this to me for nothing." Towards evening she reached a spot where the old woman was leaning against the gate-post, and passed her without saying a word. "What, you have no manners in your country?" asked the crone. "I can't stop and talk, I'm in a hurry," answered the girl. "It's getting late, and I have to find a place." "Stop and comb my hair for a little," said the old woman, "and I will help you get to a place." "Comb your hair, indeed! I have something better to do than that." And slamming the gate in the crone's face, she went her way. And she never heard the words that followed her. "You shall not have done this to me for nothing." By and by the girl arrived at the farm, and she was engaged to look after the cows and sift the corn, as her stepsister had been. But it was only when someone was watching her that she did her work. At other times, the cow-house was dirty, and the cows still fed and beaten so that they kicked over the pail and tried to butter, and everyone said they had never seen such thin cows or such poor milk. As for the cats, she chased them away and ill-treated them so that they would not even spirit to chase the rats and mice, which nowadays ran about everywhere. And when the sparrows came to beg for some corn, they fared no better than the cows or the cats, for the girl threw her shoes at them until they might fly in fright of the woods, and took shelter among the trees. Months passed in this manner, when one day the mistress called to the girl. "All that I have given you, for you have done ill," she said. "Yet I will give you another chance. For though you cannot tend cows or divide grain from shafts, there may be other things that you can do better. Therefore take the sieve to the well and fill it with water, and see that you bring it back without spilling a drop." The girl took the sieve and carried it to the well as her sister had, but no little birds came to help her, and after dipping the well 3 times she brought it back empty. "I thought as much," said the old woman angrily. "She is as useless in one thing as she is useless in another." Perhaps the mistress may have thought that the girl had learnt a lesson, but if she did, she was quite mistaken, as the work was no better than before. By and by she sent for her again, and gave for the maid black and white yarn to wash in the river. But there was no one to tell her the secret by which the black would turn white and the white would turn black, so she brought them back as they were. This time the old woman only looked at her grimly, but the girl was too pleased with herself to care what anyone else thought about her. After some weeks, her 3rd trial came, and the yarn was given to her to spin, as it was given to her stepsister before her. But no procession of cats entered the room to weave a web of fine cloth, and at sunset she had only brought back to her mistress an armful of dirty, tangled wool. "There seems nothing in the world you can do," said the old woman, and she left her to herself. Soon after this the year was up, and the girl went to her mistress to tell her that she wished to go home. "Little desire have I to keep you," answered the old woman. "For one thing you have not done that I ought. Still, I will give you some payment. Therefore go up into the loft and choose for yourself one of the caskets that lies there. But see that you do not open it till you place it where you wish it to stay." This was what the girl had been hoping for, and so rejoiced was she that, without even stopping to thank the old woman, she ran as fast as she could to the loft. There were the caskets, blue and red, green and yellow, silver and gold. In the corner stood a little black casket, just like the one her stepsister had brought home. "If there were so many jewels in that little black thing, this big red one will hold twice as much," she said to herself, and snatching it up, she set off on the road home, without even going to bid farewell to her mistress. "See, mother, what I have brought," said she, as she entered the cottage, holding the casket in both hands. "Ah, you have got something very different from the little black box," answered the old woman with delight. But the girl was so busy finding a place for it to stand that she took little notice of her mother. "It will look best here. No, here," said she, sitting it first on one piece of furniture, and then on another. "No, after all, it is fine to live in a kitchen. Let us place it in the guest chamber." So the mother and daughter carried it proudly upstairs and put it on a shelf over the fireplace. Then, untying the key from the handle, they opened the box. As before, a bright light leapt out directly from the lid as raised, but it did not spring from the lustre of jewels, but from hot flames which darted along the walls and burnt up the cottage and all that was in it, and the mother and daughter as well. As they had done when the stepdaughter came home, the neighbors hurried to see what was the matter, but they were all too late. Only the hen house was left standing, and in spite of her riches, there the stepdaughter lived happily to the end of her days.